Should we do a mic check, Steve? Check. Can you all hear me out there? Yes, no, somebody? Okay, good. Thank you. First of all, good evening. God bless you. Thank you for coming out tonight. And those of you who are tuning in, thank you for tuning in. My name is Andy Lennox. I've been affiliated with Unity since about 2010. I've done the Uniteens program here and a number of other things. And the last time that I led a meditation, I checked my notes, was 2013. And I spoke about love. And I actually took some of the notes from that, and we'll be using them tonight. What you heard just now was a chant that we'll be listening to a little bit later, and it's a really, really beautiful chant from Siddha Yoga, and I found it in my old CDs. It's actually from about 1980, and the guru who took over after Muktananda died, Guru Mai, is chanting that Om Namashivaya. And then the congregation in Fallsburg, New York, if anybody knows where that is responding. So we will be doing that chant for probably about 10 minutes. And then we will sit in silent meditation for, again, probably about 10 minutes. And then I will be speaking I'm going to try to limit myself, but there's so much that I want to share, so please bear with me, and I will try to make it interesting. Before we begin, I'd like to do a couple of exercises, and just in silence right now, take about a minute to think about the things that you want to get rid of, any kind of anxieties, any conflicts that you have, and just think about those, and we're going to call this taking the trash out. So we're going to work together, and those of you, again, who are tuning in online, your presence and your energy is really, really important. I belong to a small meditation group that meets strictly online, and what we are able to accomplish is phenomenal. So I know this to be true, that together we can put our energy together and attain this state of unconditional love and super powerful prayer. So bring your trash out to the curb, and together we're all going to get rid of it, dissipate it, or at least give it the old try. Now, the next thing that I would invite you to do is to bring into this circle all of your loved ones, children, parents, neighbors, lovers, husbands, wives, people that you want healing for, that you want to pray for, and invite them into this circle. And once again, together we will bless them as we bless each other. So give a little bit of thought about who you want to be sitting in this cosmic circle that we're creating tonight. Okay, so let's start with an opening prayer. And those of you who know it can say it along with me. It's the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. It's always been one of my favorite prayers. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself, and maybe that will explain some of my views. I actually spent the first 17 years of my life on the grounds of a mental institution. True story, my dad, who had come over from Ukraine after World War II, the first job that he could get in medicine, he'd been a surgeon in Ukraine, was as a psychiatrist in one of the state hospitals in New York. This was in the 1950s and 60s and the beginning of the 70s, where the state, especially the state of New York, but I'm guessing other states as well, used to literally warehouse people. And it was a job creator. This particular state hospital where I grew up, there were 5,000 patients and 3,000 staff, and it had its own police department and fire department and buses that used to ride through the campus and that used to take us to school, the children of the employees. And my very first memory of housing was actually an apartment where at night we had a double steel door between a ward of probably at least 100 people and our apartment. And so the sounds and the sights that I heard, I mean, I could regale you. That could be a book someday that I may write about what I witnessed. But I bring it up because my most profound spiritual teacher ever told me that it was probably the best training that I could get in my life and in my spiritual life. And as I think about that now, and the times that we are living in and what we're all enduring, a lot of the behaviors that I witnessed back then, I'm witnessing again. And it's not just the typical type of mental illnesses, but there's so much stress, there's so much pain, there's so much neurotic behavior, there's so much violence. I mean, what we're witnessing now is just unprecedented. And so I understand now what my teacher meant, that I am seeing all these things again, not necessarily for the first time. And sometimes I wonder, what side of the wall am I on? You know, back then there were walls, and there were locked doors. And I worked with someone who had also worked in one of the big institutions. And one of the patients there said to her, "Ooh, you have the keys. You're the keeper of the keys." And back then, in these old institutions, the big solid doors were opened by keys that were probably about that big, and like something out of Harry Potter, perhaps. But there's a symbolism in that. You know, nowadays everything is electronically locked, but I look at, again, the symbolism of that key and how it applies to us. And I would ask you to think about this. You know, who has your key? Have you given it away? Has someone taken it from you? It's just a good thing to keep in mind, because there's a saying that you can unlock someone's cage door, but you can't necessarily force them to come out. And we, who are subjected to so much advertising and mind control and conspiracy theory and on, you know, sometimes we give away our power. And I say that with a caveat, you know, because one of the things I wanted to talk about is how much power and control do we actually have? And the answer is very little. You know, control is an illusion. We think we have control over our own lives, and we don't. And we have influence over a few things, but not necessarily control. And we have to be very careful to not give whatever control we have away. A lot of what I am sharing tonight comes from a personal experience. You may know that I'm Ukrainian. that I have more family and friends in Ukraine. I served in the Peace Corps there in 2017 and 2018. And when the war started on February 24th of this year, I was just immersed. Every day I was on the phone for hours. I was raising money and supporting my friends and talking to them every day and getting just such an input of pictures from cell phones, things that were horrendous, bodies. I showed one picture to somebody, said, "That's not real." And I said, "Yeah, actually it is." They were just corpses from Mariupol, which was a town in southern Ukraine that was just devastated. And so all of this was going on, and I just felt like, well, this is your job. You have to do this. You have to be involved. You have to raise the money. You have to speak to your people. You have to uplift them and keep their spirits up. And what I found, we're now on about day 155 of this war, is that it took such a toll on me, physiologically, that my blood pressure started to redline. And when something bad usually happens, there's a lesson there, whether it's a karmic lesson or just an opportunity to learn. And for me, the first thing I learned is, how do you decouple your physiological reactions from the horrors that surround you? And the war in Ukraine is certainly, a horrible, horrible thing that we have been treated to so many video images on TV, and so it's just in our living rooms. We can't get away from it. But it's been going on. These types of horrors have been going on for a long time in Africa and in the Middle East, and it made me wonder. It gave me this opportunity to wonder, how do people survive the exposure to this type of brutality? And so that was sort of the beginning, and it weakened me. And I started sliding into a funk. I mean, it was, I was on my way to a depression. There was no question about it. And I pushed the alarm bell and reached out to some friends and started to pray and started to really examine, like, what am I doing? How am I approaching my life, and how am I approaching my dharma, my duty to my fellow man and woman, my sisters and brothers? And it made me realize that there are so many things right now. I'm in my late 60s, and I've never seen the world in this condition. And maybe it has been. I'm sure there have been dark times before, but in my lifetime, in my frame of reference, I am overwhelmed. I'm almost overwhelmed by what's going on. And when I look, global warming, climate change, the world is burning. The world is flooding. These are things that we've known about for decades, and we did nothing about them. And they're here. And then you watch TV, and you see our government in inaction, and how comical it is that these people that we elect, and we send them to Washington, and we pay them good salaries, are driving this bus off the cliff. And we watch children, they're like children that are fighting for nothing, over nothing. I remember once somebody said that it's like two bald men fighting over a comb. And so instead of our elected leaders, the people that we're supposed to trust, taking care of us and making sure that we are safe and that we are fed and educated and that we have equal opportunities, they're fighting, and the rich are getting richer. So this is going on. Then there's our old friend COVID, which is still with us. And there are, everyday shootings that are just, how can you kill children? How can you kill children? So I noticed all this, and I realized there's nothing I can do about that. And not only that, but I'm leaking energy that I can use to work on myself. The only thing that I have any influence over is what kind of a person can I be? You know, how closely can I align myself with God? How can I be God's servant? And so what I realized is like all this is going on, and I have the compassion and I will do the work, but I need to separate and I need to develop some coping skills so that I don't just get flushed right down the toilet and go into a deep depression. My son, who's one of my greatest advisors, said to me, "Dad, turn off NPR. Dad, turn off the news. Dad, get off of Facebook." You know, all these coping skills. And I've never been a fan of the word coping because I always thought, well, we should heal instead of cope. But this was good advice. You know, I mean, at this point, there's no unbiased news source. And what we see on social media is just this flood of noise, you know, and it's kind of meant, or if it's not meant, it certainly has the effect of keeping us off our feed, to use an expression, keeping us uncentered, keeping us anxious. And so, you know, I really saw that distinction. And the first thing that I did when I realized that I was falling into this funk is to pray. And I want to talk a little bit about prayer because prayer is a very personal thing. And for me, the prayer was a supplication. You know, I remember sitting in a hot springs and just saying, "Jesus, please help me. You know, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this." I'll tell you a little funny story about prayer. There's a guy who would pray every day, you know, I want to win the lotto. I want to win the lotto. God, please help me win the lotto. And after a couple of years, a voice came down from heaven and said, "Dude, meet me halfway. Buy a ticket." It's okay to chuckle, by the way. We need to have a little bit of humor in our spiritual lives. But that's not what prayer is about, at least not to me. You know, it's not about, "God, please give me a car. God, please give me a job." Those are okay to pray for, but the real prayer is, "God, reveal yourself to me. Let me live in unity with you. Let me know you and serve you and live a surrendered life." When I gave a talk here a little while ago about Ukraine and my experiences, I read this quote, and I want to read it to you again. It's, "I surrender myself to God without any conditions or reservations. I shall not bargain with God. I shall not make my surrender piecemeal, but I shall lay bare the very center of me, that all of my very being shall be charged with the creative energy of God. Little by little, or vast area by vast area, my life must be transmuted in the life of God. As this happens, I come into the meaning of true freedom, and the burdens that I seemed unable to bear are floated in the current of the life and love of God. The central element of communion with God is the act of self-surrender." That was written by a minister by the name of Howard Thurman. So we're actually getting to a good part here. You know, what's the antidote for what we can't control? And it is that relationship with God and the way that we can pray, what we can pray for, we can live in a state of being is really to cultivate that relationship with God. So that in the back of your mind, but fully in your heart, you are always thinking about God. You are always seeking God. You are always yearning for God. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you will be walking around in a state of grace and bliss. That'd be great if we could do that. I mean, I certainly wouldn't mind. But it's always that hide and seek, that you all know, if you're here sitting in this room or listening to this lecture, you know that you are connected to God. And we forget, because of the noise, because of the externalities, we're pulled away from that at our detriment. So I think we constantly have to remind ourselves that I am in a constant search for God. And God reveals herself or himself, however you see God, in ways that we don't necessarily acknowledge. When I said that prayer of supplication, when I first felt like so overwhelmed, and I said, God, please, I really need your help. How does one know that your prayers are answered, that God answers your prayers? And I remember getting calls from friends that I hadn't heard in a long time, just asking, how are you doing? Having my children reach out to me, getting a smile from a stranger. And that's God using our sisters and brothers to do his work, to show us that what is God? God is love, unconditional love. And the more we cultivate that relationship with God, the more comfortable we get with surrendering ourselves to God and not trying to control our lives. And that's a big one. I mean, it's a big one to, people say, I lead a surrendered life. Boy, I wish. I mean, there are times when I surrender, but there are other times where I'm just so unaware of how much I'm trying to drive the bus. And so this is what we need to be aware of, and pray all the time, and prayer can take many different forms. My friends in the Episcopal Church have a book of prayers, and they say, well, we have all these great prayers, and for me, it's like, that's fine, but I like to open my heart and tell God and tell my sisters and brothers, this is what I'm feeling. This is how I hurt. This is what I am joyous about. Because I think one of the very positive things that we can do for ourselves, and we do operate on this psycho-spiritual spectrum, where there's the emotional, mental health component, which is what we can influence, and then it slides right in, there's a continuum to our relationship with God, with the divine. And I actually heard Dr. Eva, who spoke here a little while ago, she referred to that as well, the psycho-spiritual spectrum. So one of the things that we can do to help ourselves on that, on the part that's our responsibility, is to share, is to find help, whether it's a counselor or a best friend. And this is where vulnerability plays such a big part. Brene Brown talks about vulnerability, and my therapist, who is a good friend of mine now, said to me, vulnerability is the gift that I give to myself. And so I find it very helpful to just release that energy, to vocalize and verbalize. And as I do that, first of all, it's just a release of energy. And then I look at it, and it's like, okay, so you're feeling this way, and you're feeling that way, and this makes you feel better, and this makes you feel worse. And it's a form of prayer almost, because as you're talking, God is listening. Honestly, one of the other things that I do, a coping skill, or at least something positive to to counterbalance all the negativity, the toxicity in the world in which we live, is to go out into nature. And I talk to God. I'll be walking and I'm like, all right, God, so Now, you have to realize this was acceptable behavior when I was growing up in the institution. Many people spoke to seemingly no one at all. And it's acceptable to me now, that I can verbalize and vocalize what is going on in my mind, and that it brings me clarity. But the big thing, the key to all this, is that there does exist this state of unconditional love. And somebody said to me earlier today, yeah, we need to master that. And I'm like, yeah, that's a dream. And I don't know if I will ever master that. I mean, I would have to live in a monastery or, be in seclusion or a renunciant. But I've tasted it and I've seen it, and I know in my heart that this is God. And that is the cure-all, And so this group that I meditate with, and we do Tibetan chanting, it's run originally by a Qigong master from Minnesota called Master Chanyi Lin, who at the beginning of every year runs these 7 days of meditations. They're beautiful and they're free. And we got the recordings and we play them. And he says that unconditional love is the most powerful force in the universe. It absolutely is. There's no doubt in my mind. And we create that, and we create it in groups. And I hope that when we start meditating in just a short amount of time, that you keep that concept in mind, that what you're bringing here into this circle that we've created is the ability to love, the desire to be loved, and a quest for that unconditional love that is God. And I have been talking for a long time, but the Greeks have actually 5 words for love. And they are epithumia, which is a strong desire of any kind, eros, which is self-explanatory, storge, which is the comfortable old shoe relationships that we have, phileo, the love of relationship, and this is the big one, agape. And you've probably heard that before. Agape is the highest form of love. Agape is the totally unselfish love that has the capacity to give and keep on giving without expecting in return. Agape values and serves, in contrast to phileo, which cherishes and enjoys. Agape is the force that keeps the weeds of selfishness out of the garden of true love. Agape works when the feelings aren't there. Agape can survive when all else fails. So when we start meditating in just a minute or two, make that your prayer. I invite you to do that, to ask God and the angels. And by the way, we are surrounded by angels. We see so much negativity, but it just dawned on me recently that when I was in my times of stress and trial, it's like, well, why don't I invite angels to surround me? Because God appears in so many different forms. And so let's invite the angels into our meditation, and let's ask for that agape, to feel that divine love, that ultimate manifestation of Godness, that turns off the mind, that is just from the heart, that envelops your entire body and your soul. And if you can lose yourself for even a minute in that feeling, what a gift that is. And if you can share it, if we all do this together, if we can create this energy of love here, we can blow the roof off this place. So I invite you to do that, to direct that love to everybody else in this room, to each other, to the people who are watching online, to direct that love to the people that you're brought into our circle, that you want to pray for. And I'll share with you one little method that I do when I'm in silent meditation and I think about, I want to pray for my children. On the inhale, I just visualize, my son or my daughter. And on the exhale, I just feel love coming out of my heart and surrounding them. And it's a way to pass the time, but it's also just a way that I pray. So thank you for indulging me. I've been speaking for far too long now. And Steve, if we could start the Om Namashivaya chant, which again is from 1980. It's a beautiful call and response. And I invite you to chant also, just Om Namashivaya, which is, I praise God and I praise Lord Shiva. So, and then in 10 minutes we'll turn this down and we'll have a silent meditation for 10 minutes. As we bring the music up just a little bit, come back into your bodies and feel gratitude for the amount of love that you have received and the amount of love that you have shared tonight. One of the passages of the Bible that really moves me is the story of the Last Supper and how Jesus washed everybody's feet, and then he's saying goodbye, and he says to the apostles, and now I leave you with one last commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. That's it, one last commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. And that's it in a nutshell. That's the cure for all our ills, and that's the way that we can cultivate our relationship with God and really become one with God. That we love one another as Christ loved us. So I think it's time now to take an offering for unity. And are there any ushers here who take care of this? I'm unfamiliar with the process. Wonderful. Volunteers, I love it. And as you take your offering into your hand, bless it with the words that Jack normally says, which I honestly don't remember, but
Find love through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, because I give and
okay, if you didn't hear that, just say a blessing that your offering will do good for your sisters and brothers. So, thank you. Steve, if we could crank the music up just a tiny bit. Okay, we can turn the music off. Thank you very much for your generosity. Thank you for your generosity of spirit, for bringing your love into this room tonight, for meditating together, for sharing, and just bringing this beautiful energy that is just so nourishing. And as we go forth, you know, I just want to tell you I love you all. I bless you all. And I wish you peace and the ability to separate yourself from what you can't control, all those externalities, and the desire to connect with your inner God and your angels, and to bring that peace, that Christ love into your heart that you can influence. So with that, thank you for indulging me. I know I talked quite a bit, and thank you for coming tonight. And I think there's tea and cookies in the gift shop, so God bless you all.